I want you to think about your athlete for a second. Have you ever watched them in practice and thought, oh, they've got this? They're confident, they're making plays, they're communicating. They look like the athlete you've been waiting to see. And then game day comes. And it's like someone switched bodies with them. They're hesitant, they're second guessing themselves, they're passing instead of attacking. And you're standing there wondering, where did my kid from practice go? Hi, I'm Sam. And if you've ever asked that question, I think you might be starting in the wrong place. And changing where you start and changing that one question can completely change how you support your athlete. Welcome back to Locker Talk. And we are talking about how pressure illuminates behavior and gives us clues to the patterns that are happening underneath the surface with our athletes, and how the skills that we help them develop turn into the leadership, life, and career skills of the future when they become adults. I coached a basketball player years ago who was exactly like this. In practice, they were unbelievable. His handles were incredible. He attacked the basket. He played really free and loose. And I remember thinking, oh man, I can't wait to watch this kid in a game. Like, super excited about having them on the team. And then the first game started, and he barely looked like the same player. And his dad found me after the game and said, I don't know what happened. Like he looked like a totally different kid in that game than I've seen him when he's shooting around in the backyard. And I've probably heard that question asked hundreds of times since then, standing on the sidelines, sitting in the stands. It's things I've seen and heard and felt parents say often. It's from basketball, baseball, soccer, football, volleyball. It does not matter what sport we're talking about. It happens to everybody. It's one of the most common questions and common problems that we face in youth sports. And I think a lot of people answer it completely wrong, because here's what we assume. We assume that they've got a skill problem. If we build up their skills enough, if we help them get enough reps in, help them, cross some magic threshold, then all of a sudden they'll be able to access those skills in game. And so we think we're sitting with a skill problem. But what if it's not skill at all? We spend so much time asking, how do I get my athlete to play like they do in practice? But I don't think that that's the right question or the most interesting question. I think where we're better off starting is, what is the game revealing that practice can't? And that really changes how you approach everything, because practice and competition aren't measuring the same thing. Practice shows us what an athlete can do when the environment is predictable. We know the pattern, we know what we're doing, we know really what to expect. The expectations of a drill are really clearly laid out. Even scrimmages, game time situations in practice are very different. Competition itself asks a completely different question. It asks, how do they respond when expectations show up, when mistakes matter, when people are watching, when the score matters, when the speed changes, when they don't know what's going to happen next. And that's why we say pressure doesn't create a behavior, it reveals it. Now, here's where this all gets really interesting to me. Two athletes can look the same from the stands. Maybe both hesitate, both stop attacking, both seem to lose confidence, but underneath, they may be dealing with completely different things. One athlete may still be thinking about the mistake they made 2 possessions ago. Another might be afraid of making the next mistake. Another might be overwhelmed at the speed of the game. Another may simply not know how to recover emotionally once something goes wrong or doesn't go their way. Same behavior. They look like they shut down, they get frustrated, they start playing differently, but it's a different underlying pattern. And that's why generic advice rarely works. And honestly, this is where I think parents accidentally make things harder. And it's because we care so much and we want to help and we want to fix. We desperately hate seeing those moments where our athletes struggle. And so we jump right into fixing mode, into let me help them not face that mistake again, not face that problem again, not face that hesitancy again. And so when the game ends, you get in the car and you say things like, hey, great job, good game. But when this situation happens, when you get in the lane again, make sure you're doing a bounce pass, not a chest pass, right? Because bounce passes are better in that situation. Or hey, when you're making that play at second base, remember you need to be moving a little bit before the ball comes, right? When you're working on the angle of the shot in the soccer game, hey, remember you've got to make sure that you're lined up correctly to get that into the net. We jump into these reminders, we jump into this help. And the problem is, your athlete already knows. They know they didn't play their best. They know they made the mistake. They don't need another reminder. What they need is first and foremost connection, and then they need your curiosity. So instead of asking, hey, why couldn't you do that today? Or, hey, let me tell you how you should have done that today, try asking what felt different today, right? What did you do after you made that mistake that helped you stay in the game? When did you feel most confident, right? What do you think you want to work on before the next game, the next practice? And those are completely different conversations. One is trying to fix, one is trying to offer advice. The other is trying to understand, starting in curiosity, starting in understanding what is my athlete feeling? What are they thinking? What patterns are going on? And I believe that understanding is the key place to start because you cannot intentionally develop, you cannot help well if you don't understand what's going on. And that's why you've got to start there. The reason I pay attention to moments like this is because I don't think sports are just testing skill. I think sports are revealing patterns, patterns in how the athlete responds under pressure, patterns in how they respond to mistakes, how they recover, how they handle uncomfortable situations. And those patterns can be developed. These are just skills, recovery skills more often than not. And that's the exciting part. So the next time you're standing on the sideline thinking, where did my kid from practice go? Try asking yourself a different question. What is this game revealing that practice couldn't? Because once you understand the pattern, you can actually develop it. And here's why I think that matters so much. The reason I pay attention to youth sports isn't because every missed shot or bad game predicts the future. It's because I've spent years working with adults and leaders under pressure in their careers. I've watched professionals receive difficult feedback. I've been the one to deliver that a lot of times. I've watched managers shut down after mistakes. I've watched talented people stop taking risks or stop using their voice because they became afraid of failing. And over again in those situations, I find myself thinking, I've seen this pattern before. Not in the boardroom, not in the meeting room, not in the team's meeting, but on a basketball court, on a baseball field, on a soccer pitch. The uniform changes, the pressure changes, but the pattern often looks surprisingly familiar. That's why youth sports matter, not because they're preparing kids to win more matches. They're giving us thousands of opportunities to notice how they respond to pressure while those responses are still developing. Sports reveal patterns, pressure reveals behavior, development changes them. And on Friday, you'll see why this pattern doesn't disappear when the uniform comes off. It simply shows up in a different arena. So until then, remember that your athlete develops best and you grow best as an adult when you put down the popcorn and get in the game.